Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's audio event with myself and Thomas, the second instalment of the Dan and Thomas show, or Thomas and Dan show, however you want to call it, where we discuss all things. I should have put your name first there, sorry. Where we discuss all
things. It can be Dan and Thomas.
Okay, we're going to be discussing all things cloud done correctly, as our company motto says. Whether you're joining us live or joining us retrospectively, thank you for taking the time to listen to us. Hopefully you'll find this session to be engaging, insightful, and hopefully you can get something from this. It's only our second audio event as a company, and it's the second time we've got a slightly different format of doing things. So if there are any teething issues, please bear with us. We've got people in the background who are guiding us in the right direction. So I'm sure we will be absolutely fine. So today, myself and Thomas, we're going to be talking about some of the key ingredients that are required, or we think are required, to help prepare and build an organization to be future ready and ready to go into the cloud. In terms of who we are, in case you're not aware who we are, so I'm Dan Bennett. I'm the DevOps Practice Director at CompasSitas. I come with over 10 years worth of experience working internally and working with clients, not just from a dev perspective or a DevOps perspective, but making sure that their organizations and their solutions are cloud ready and cloud native. Thomas, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Dan. Thomas Barnes. I'm the Service Design Director at CompasSitas, and been at CompasSitas, I think, 19 years this year. And back then it was, there's this thing called cloud that no one actually uses. So things have come a long way during that time, and it's, I guess we've been through with lots of clients the whole process of building future-ready organizations. So it's good to be able to, I guess, bounce some of those ideas around here, perhaps something of what you guys have been doing as well. And hopefully we get a bit of a community feel to this, where we don't want this to be just us dictating from the front, but sharing ideas. If you've got ideas, stick them in the chat, or drop us a message, and there might be something we can include next time.
Yes, we have got people in the background, not just helping us get through this, but also monitoring the questions. So if you have any questions...
We have a massive team behind us. This is amazing.
Luckily,
we have Lisa in the background, so
yes.
if Lisa spots your message, she'll pass it on.
Luckily, we don't need makeup. I guess when it goes actually like live in person, then maybe. But we'll see. We'll see. Right, let's get into it, shall we? So, as I said, we're going to be discussing the key ingredients we think are needed to succeed in future-proofing organizations for the cloud. There's a lot of talk of ingredients here. I don't know how good your cooking is, Thomas, but hopefully your cooking of getting organizations in a good place is going to be better than, well, I don't know. You tell me, how good's your cooking?
That's very cheesy. Talking of cooking, I did make a Black Forest Gatto last week, or at least my kids did, with a little bit of project management from me. So that was fun. It tasted all right. It didn't look the most professional, but I guess in terms of making clouds,
yes,
there's 101 ways people set out to do it, and the three important ingredients. So you've got the people, you've got the process, and you've got the technology, as of any kind of organizational change you're trying to go through. So it's largely, if you get those three things right, which sounds simple, you end up with a beautifully tasting cloud, if that's the thing.
Like as light as a feather, like an angel cake or an angel delight or something like that. No, so I'm going to move away from food, otherwise just go out of hand. There's always one or two kind of visuals that we've always used in the past, we've spoken about, and we use on client engagements that I think really resonates here. So I know last time, if for anyone who was around in our first of these sessions, we were talking around the quality, speed, and value. You've got your famous triangle of, deliver fast without compromising on quality, provide value for money whilst not slowing delivery down, and improve the quality and create quality products without massive overhead. And I always kind of feel these three factors could also be in a triangle, but they're kind of like the enabling factors to enable this triangle to work in an effective way. Would you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, you mean the people, the process, and the technology?
Absolutely,
yeah.
Yes.
The thing with triangles is that shape that you can't squash, isn't it? And things tend to go in threes and be represented nicely in triangles. So yeah, you've got the value triangle. I guess today is the organization triangle. How do you get those three things right such that you have a nice equally sized triangle?
Yeah, and I mean, from experience, I know it's been the same with me when I've been on client engagements, and I'm sure it's the same with you as well. We give it to the company in the triangle view and then say that people, process, technology. Without these things, you can't make that triangle happen. From what I've seen on clients, that gets pretty good reception, because I guess you're kind of always focusing on the speed, the quality, the value. But then actually, how do you make that happen? I think sometimes it's not that it's not known, but just how pivotal each three of those ingredients are to delivering a quality product in a safe, sound, quick, and value efficient way. Have you had like experience from your side of where that's been well received?
Yeah, I mean, I think it resonates with a lot of people, right? Everyone knows that you've got these different aspects. I guess when people are approaching cloud, either from a perspective of, oh, let's migrate to the cloud, or yeah, perhaps it's something that they did 5 years ago and they're going, is the cloud working for us? And you've now got very large organizations migrating out of the cloud. A lot of the time, the technology comes front and center. And it's like you've got one of those triangles where it's a very tall isosceles triangle that points right up there at the top, and the other two get left behind at the bottom. And if you're just focusing on the technology, then it kind of sets up to fail, because if you take the technology that you have in your data center, a lot of organizations did this, in the earlier days of the cloud. You take that technology and you go, let's move it over and get it hosted by Azure, hosted by Amazon, hosted by Google. Other providers are available. If you just do that, then you've ended up with a different data center. You've got someone else running it for you. It costs more money. There'll be other things which make it less useful than when you had it in your own data center and you had a bit more control. And so people look at it and they go, well, why do we bother doing this then? And they're kind of right. But if you actually transform the process and you upskill the people and you let the people take ownership of that whole process, and you build teams which are built around the cloud, then you start delivering all those value points, right? You get the cost efficiency, you get the speed of delivery because it's so much more agile, and you get the quality because you can automate a lot of the controls around it, which you couldn't do in the data center.
Yeah, this makes a lot of sense, and I'm liking. We've only just started, them, but already questions coming in. This is really good. Do we want to tackle that first, or shall we get into some of the content? It looks like a very good question, to be fair. So we've got Robert, who's joining us, who's coming from a sustainable development background. Lots of companies are or have moved on-prem to off-prem. So I guess for context of what we're talking today, and it makes companies look better on Scope 1 reporting. Do we have best practice guide to report on companies' Scope 3 emission reporting for companies, etc.?
Yeah, okay, that's really interesting question. A lot of companies look at, so you move into the cloud, you can look at your own sustainability reporting off the back of what Azure provide, what AWS provide, and it looks really good. We did this with a government client a couple of years ago, and they said, yeah, how much carbon emissions do we have? What's our sustainability like? Let's look at the Azure dashboard. Let's look at the AWS dashboard. I think the AWS one, it showed absolutely zero, except for one day when there was a tiny little spike. And it's like, this is brilliant. But obviously, that's a view which a lot of things have been, I don't like using the word, maybe greenwashed out of, and you've ended up with a view which is very dictated by that cloud provider. Like you say, it looks a lot better on the reporting because there's a lot of things you're not taking into account, and it's fudging in things like the amount of compensation they're making for the emissions. So emissions from data centers, and particularly cloud data centers, is one of the biggest sources of emissions today. It's bigger than air travel or anything like that.
That's actually crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's where there's a whole huge business in construction and sourcing and powering of data centers, just because there's ever increasing demands for that, and AI is only going to make that a much bigger thing. However quickly the Chinese can train their models, it's still going to take quite a lot of compute to train and manage that. So we've used open source tools, and it's something we can perhaps share on. I can dig out the links and send that over. Maybe do a post on LinkedIn. We use open source tools, and we did this with this government client to build a dashboard which actually analyzes a lot of the other factors that go into that, which aren't captured by the cloud providers reporting. And they can actually look at it and go, "Whoa, actually, yeah, there is a fair bit of emission." And also, here's a whole load of ways we can reduce that. Because reducing the emissions isn't the same as reducing the costs. You can reduce a lot of costs by buying reserved instances or whatever. That doesn't reduce your emissions. If anything, it increases it. You've got, in order to reduce your emissions, you've actually got to simplify your product, and you've got to remove excess waste and so on. So, yeah, it's a really interesting topic, and maybe worth having a whole session on that at some point.
Yeah, I know we kind of started touching upon some of the climate impacts last time. I think that is a potential topic we can talk about, because there's a lot of interest in it, and yeah, that was a really good question. So thank you, Robert, for that. Let's start talking about people, because I think this kind of ties in kind of to what we just discussed there around, we've got the emissions and stuff like that, but unless you get the people trained in the right areas and getting them agile, adaptable, inquisitive, it doesn't happen. You don't deliver quality, speed, and value, really. So probably a good segue into that, I'd say.
Yeah, I think the thing with, and this is why we want to do people first, unless your people really have ownership of the journey, unless it's a cultural change, which, at the end of the day, well, it's a fancy word, people are changing things in their mindset and things about their day-to-day lives at work. Unless that happens, you will end up with a more costly, probably slower, probably more error-prone, probably less sustainable hosting platform than you had before. But if you get the culture right, it can really power the value across all those areas.
That's the thing. I think you can change all the processes, you change all the technology, all the bells and whistles, unless you galvanate the hearts and minds of the people and get them on board and get them delivering in the way you need them to, then you're not going to get the benefits that the cloud really provides. Really, I know we're currently working with a couple of clients where they've got the right ideas in mind of, we want to implement this process, that process, we want to use a smaller set, standardized set of tools. But then it's getting the people on board with that and getting the people aware that, things do need to change. They need to be more collaborative, and not just within their own teams, but, my background comes from DevOps, right? It says it all. Dev and ops need to work together, really. And that's it's easier said than done in a process. It's getting the people to understand that. And it's not an easy thing, right? It does require investment in time and money to get people the right skills and the right competencies to be able to deliver. We want to empower the teams and the people to thrive in a vibrant, collaborative environment, right? So
yeah, I mean, the skills are important, right? You've got people who understand the cloud services, the different technologies they're working with. Really, the more you become cloud native, the more you want your developers to get a hang of architectural skills, and it should be uplifting everyone's skills level to become that bit more strategic, because you've suddenly got this control that you never had before over the details of exactly what resources there when and how you use them, and access to services on demand. And the way that developers interact with that, it becomes much more architectural. But actually understanding the resources, understanding that is important, getting the cloud types of skills. You can obviously do a whole load of certification on different platforms, and that's quite useful. We get our guys to do that, but a lot of the time that is just, it's looking at your ability, and the more advanced you go, if you start taking a professional solution architect and stuff, that's kind of your ability to think very quickly about different ways of adapting architectures on the cloud. And it really comes down to some of the core competencies that kind of need to sit there behind the skills of being very flexible and able to adapt. And if you're not flexible and able to adapt, you're going to kind of struggle in a cloud landscape, because that's kind of what the cloud's about.
Yeah, it's very similar with collaboration. You know, we talk about agility, and you know, DevOps is built off of being agile, really. And you know, you don't do that from just working siloed or just sticking within your teams. It requires everyone pulling together, collaborating in one cohesive direction to get to the common goal. And then within that, it's not just a standard mundane bunch of tasks. You do need to innovate. You know, this is one of the things I've been quite vocal on when I've posted on LinkedIn around, you know, putting investment into innovation, because innovation is the future, and innovation is how your company is gonna you know, improve essentially. There's also inquisitivity, which I guess kind of comes into adaptability as well. But you can be adaptable and not really care so much. I think you've got to want to care and have that intuition and inquisitivity to be okay. Let's dig into this deeper. Let's see what we can do. I'm sure there are other competencies out there. They're like the three that come to mind for me. Have you had any exposure or experience in the past with your clients of like, these are the competencies and skills you need to have to be successful?
I was talking to one of the engineers at a bank I've been working with recently, and he said, "Oh, no one's ever really taught me about the cloud, and that they were using Azure and Azure App Services, which it wasn't a great solution for what they were trying to do." But he'd inherited this, and he's like, "But you know, actually, I know all about the issues with this now. I just had to keep asking questions and keep hunting around to find out, you know, what was going on, and I really cared about the outcome." And I said, "Well, that's kind of, if you got those two things, like you ask questions until you find out the answer, you care about the outcome until you get it done, you're in a great place to work on the cloud, because you know, you could, that's the way that you have an adapted mindset, and that's the way that you innovate, and that's the way that you find out new stuff and evolve what you're building to meet it. If you're asking questions, owning the outcomes, do those two things, and if you've got a team doing that, you've got a very powerful cloud team."
Yeah. You want teams to feel empowered, really, in a situation like that where you've just been handed something. What do you do? You know, we've had similar situations in the past with our internal team, where we've got our product hosted in Azure, although other providers are available. And you know, there's a lot of learning on the fly, but then you got to give them empowerment and the trust to, you know, have a play, go and learn for themselves, and you know, make mistakes. You only learn, and you only go on this cloud journey by making mistakes. Just make sure they're not as costly. That's why you have like test environments and local environments and stuff like that. But I think, yeah, the empowerment of the team, you can have all the competencies and all the skills all you want. You know, there's got to be an emphasis on empowering the people within the team to, you know, to develop these skills, to learn these competencies, to, you know, to help the organization as a whole, and also to help them as well. It's an investment in themselves as individuals, as professionals, which the company will only benefit from. I think that's fair enough to say.
Yeah, if you've got any questions or points on people, do drop them in the chat. So, comment from Danny about variations in emissions. It sounds like this sustainability is a topic.
I think we found one of our next topics. Yes.
Yeah, there's a whole lot that can be said on that, so might take more than 45 minutes. But yeah, any questions or comments on people, do drop them in. I think in terms of people and organization, and this might be veering towards our process topic, you want at the heart of your organization to have a group of people who are really clued up about the cloud. Okay, and I'm very much in favor of a platform as a product concept. You know, you've got a cloud platform, let's treat it like a product. Let's use let's treat our application teams, our product teams, as the customers, and let's provide the things that they're going to need to make their lives easier out of that cloud platform. And part of that is making sure those product teams have the knowledge about the cloud that they need to make the best of it as well. So you've got a cloud enabling team, perhaps, and think about an org structure. You might even have, you know, two wings of your DevOps function, one of which is about the platform and the cloud capability, and one which is about the product and building on that cloud capability. Which might segue us into process, perhaps, Dan.
That segues us very nicely into that, I would say. Yeah, I agree with the point you said about there with DevOps, and I think we're kind of finding similar with a current client we're working with at the moment in the financial sector. They've got, I guess we call them these enabling functions, where they basically take charge of the processes and the tech in the background to enable that kind of collaboration. And I think where we also are is you've got a lot of these dev-minded people, the ops-minded people, also having to then think about the cost side and CostOps and FinOps and merging all those together. Green ops. I mean, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But then go on, sorry.
So I was just going to throw that one back at you. So
I was ready to answer, ready to bat it back.
Having all those ops, how do you tie that together into a process? How do you get your team actually owning the cloud platforms and thinking about cost and finance and sustainability and DevOps capability and all those good things that you want in your process?
Yeah, it is a tricky one. I think, again, it ties into what we've already discussed with the people of you need to make sure that they've got the right kind of competencies and skills. But then on the process side, I mean, I can speak what we've done from our own experience, and we've come from a background where certain developers are like, oh, I don't need to know about cost, I don't need to know about FinOps because that's not my job. Actually, that's the complete opposite approach. Like, if you're spinning up something in the cloud and you're not aware of what the cost of it is, that's a big problem. So I think there are several ways we address this. I guess you've got the old-fashioned, well-tried strategy documents and stuff like that, and just general communication across the team of this is what is expected of the standard, refreshers, what have you. I guess for bigger organizations where you've got lots of those individual product teams and they've all got the same problem or different problems, what I have found works pretty well, and we kind of advise this when we work with clients, is the idea of communities of practice. So getting all of these people together with the common interest, the common skill, pulling them together and being like, okay, oh, this is what I'm doing in DevOps, this is what we're doing in DevOps, and bringing that all together for, let's say, that one common process. You can kind of go into a lot of these organizations where they've got lots of different teams, which they should be operating off of like one process, one model, one way of doing things. And you find there are like hundreds of different ways of doing things. Communities of practice is designed to try and avoid that and to keep it centralized for one process to be used across the rest of the organization within that particular function. I know you've had some practice and exposure with communities of practice.
Communities.
Yeah.
I was going to talk a bit about the concept of a center of excellence, because we can talk forever about writing process documents, but the thing is, you write your process documents and then either and this is one we've seen, you write your process documents and you don't tell anyone about it, or you write your process documents and you put it somewhere and no one knows where you've put it, or you write your process documents, you put it somewhere, everyone knows where you put it, but no one bothers to read it for some reason.
Yeah, I've had that before.
You've had that before. I thought you might have.
Yeah, I've been guilty of that myself as well.
So I like the concept of a centre of excellence. I don't like how it's often executed. And I've been in organizations where they say, let's have a cloud center of excellence. And some architects are going to go off in some ivory tower somewhere and they're going to write down a whole load of ways that we should use the cloud. And they'll put them in one of those places, which maybe someone will look at. Or maybe even they'll build them into some kind of governance. Whereas surely the idea of a center of excellence is that you've got, at the core of it, a team of people who actually know the cloud, who actually are cloud engineers and cloud architects, and they are able to then form that center, which is going to disseminate, if you like, excellence around the organization. And I did actually do a LinkedIn post on this last week. I like to think of it as this square onion, which you can find on my LinkedIn.
Great plug. I was waiting for that to come up.
Square onion, which has 4 layers. In the middle, in the center, you've got your excellent team, and your excellent team, your cloud platform team, are working on building up those skills, those behaviors, those competencies, empowering the rest of your people to thrive. And they do that in the next 3 layers. So the first thing they'll do is they will be standards, okay? And those standards won't be some document on a shelf. They'll be the things that team lives and breathes, and they write it down and they go, this is what we do. And then third layer of your square onion, we're working out from the middle. They're going to take those standards and they're going to build accelerators, enablers. They're going to build template pipelines and template dashboards and template infrastructure as code, and they're going to build that into the pipelines. And the more they do that, the more reusable what they do will become. And it will mean that their time is better used, and they're able to reuse their own. They get to eat their own cooking. Let's go back to the cooking analogy.
Yeah.
But all the product teams are able to work that much faster, because instead of going, oh, let me go and build myself a Kubernetes cluster, they'll go, here is the template, and surprise, surprise, that template follows the standards, because those standards were built by that team. And then they go out to the fourth layer, which is let's tell everyone about it. And that's where your communities of practice come in, and that's where they'll present about all the exciting stuff they've done at town halls, and about how much time this is saving, and how much cheaper it's making things, and how much more value it's adding. And that information and those skills, that team will be pushing out around the organization. And that's the only way I've actually seen culture really being changed. You can get your coach in from outside who's going to give everyone a new culture, but unless you actually get it embedded into the team and working out from the heart of your organization, very difficult to actually change anything in the long run.
Just doesn't work, does it, if you don't have that that kind of proactivity and the investment in it, really.
I'm getting overexcited about my square onions there.
I do kind of feel we do need to bring that up in another. I think we've got our next topic, to be fair, the Cloud Center of Excellence and the Square Onion. It sounds like
maybe after the sustainability.
Yes.
Possibly it's the next thing to go on a t-shirt.
I mean, after might as well face it, you're addicted to cloud. Yes. We're getting our merch line sorted, aren't we, really? But there we go. Yeah, I just want to say one last thing on the communities of practice, which I think is quite important to say here. And that is, particularly in an organization where they're on the journey to get to the cloud and to get to better practices and better processes, you want to be very, I would say, inclusive, from my personal opinion, in the communities of practice. I know, I'm trying to remember, there was a client I was working with a while ago where they had a communities of practice set up, which is a great first step, but it was very much like, oh, you can't enter unless X, Y, Z. It kind of felt very, very elitist, and like, oh, you have to have knowledge on this to be able to contribute. But actually, if you're in a scope, let's say, like, take testing, QA, if you're a team who are looking to implement automation to get ready for the cloud, you don't want to be excluding them, right? You want to make sure that if they've got the right intentions, they've got the competencies we're trying to ask people to show, let's not put them out of the curb and be like, no, because you're not experienced on this, no, goodbye. Otherwise, that then, affects the process, affects the people as well. And you need people to do the processes and the technology, as we'll kind of touch upon in the next point with technology, right? All three of those are needed together. It's not one and then I'll cherry pick out one of them. They all need to happen together. These three things.
Yeah. And you also, if you're going to maintain a community of practice, you need to have the rest of your square onion, because otherwise you're going to run out of things to talk about, right? If it's like, let's get together and we're all firefighting, okay, there'll be things that you can share. But unless you're actually sitting down strategically as a team and you're improving things day on day, it's going to be very difficult to actually say it's worth taking time out from firefighting to talk about how we're doing it.
Yeah, agreed.
With another client yesterday, and be careful what I say. I don't know who's in listening and who isn't. But I said they've done a lot of good work to create centres of excellence and to get people together. But she said to me, it's got to the stage where we have our or not so much the centres of excellence. They've done some on that, more on the community of practice, getting people together. He said it's got to the stage where we have our community of practice meeting, and 3 people turn up and we sit there and talk about the weather, because no one else is interested.
Yeah.
And until you've actually got the centre of excellence driving that, it's hard to make that stick.
The centre of excellence in communities of practice also needs to be a well-governed process in itself, really. Whilst it is there designed to help everyone get on board with the processes, that itself needs to be regimented with some kind of process to avoid the weather talk, which, being in the UK, I'd imagine that was quite wet and quite miserable talk. Just going to put it out there.
Yes, this is the one where someone's dialed in from Greece and you're all envying them.
I wish. In fact, that might come back to sustainability and the climate, but there we go. I don't know if anyone has any questions on process. Feel free to put them in the chat and we can come back to that.
I was just going to say all the bits around all the layers of my famous onion. They,
You love your
they
onion.
I know, love my onions. With my triangles and my onions. Going back to that, each of
Yes.
those is going to involve good and constructive processes. You're
Mm.
setting standards. You're gonna have processes around that. One thing we did at the same government client actually I mentioned earlier, we put a process around how the standards were used because we wanted to make sure they were being used where they should be. But at the same time, we didn't want to be bottling up everyone's innovation and going like, you know, thou shalt always use Kubernetes this way if someone's got a better way. So what we said is your architecture and your design, uh, just match it against the standard, and we'll see whether what you've done needs more assurance or not. And if they'd adopted enterprise service that we built, so we built a Kubernetes service and they could simply deploy the containers to it, great, you're platinum. Yeah, no need to check anything. If they've taken our template and gone and created it like for like from the templates we've created, you're gold. No need to check anything. Perhaps you've taken it and you've tweaked it and you think it's an improvement or you think it's better suited for your situation. Okay, silver. It's not saying there's anything wrong with it, but we will need to check it and we will need to run it past the cloud experts to make sure that what you've done fits your situation. Or maybe you've just gone completely, completely off the cuff. You've come up with something completely new, and from a it may be the greatest thing ever, but just from an assurance perspective, it's bronze. It will need that assurance. It will need to be gone through with the cloud experts again, just to make sure it's the right solution for you. That's an example of a process.
That is an example of a good process. I guess there are no questions coming up at the moment, so I guess we'll kind of segue nicely into the third layer of this is not your onion, the third, let's say,
Third point of the
enabler.
triangle.
Third point of the triangle, the enabler. Yes, the triangles and onions. There you go. It is around technology and trying to get the architecture right from the start, which is, I think it's easier said than done, right? So this is going to be a very open-ended question. So feel free to take that how you want to take it. How do you get the cloud architecture right?
There's going to be two things that you need to think about, aren't there? So there's what's our application architecture in the cloud, and what's the architecture that enables us to get our applications in the cloud and run them there and so on. So yeah, how do you get your architecture right such that it is meeting all your targets, and that will be all those value statements, right? How sustainable should your architecture be? How cost effective should it be? How scalable? How agile should it make you? And then there's the whole question of your architecture for using the cloud. What does your tool chain look like for your building for the cloud, deploying into the cloud, managing in the cloud, monitoring observability into the cloud, decommissioning out of your cloud? What's your tool chain look like? And then what does your architecture look like? Is that
That's
a
a good.
fair split, do you think?
I think so. I think on the tooling, you raise a quite an interesting point. So I've been in clients before, different kind of scenarios where they don't have a lot of tools, but they're using them really well. And then you've got a lot of tools being used as part of the tool chain, but some of them aren't really being used, which obviously you use a particular tool, they're going to cost you money, and that's going to affect particular margins. So from your experience, like how do you find that balance between, let's say, finding the right tools in your standardized tool chain versus having too many? Because I'd imagine that's quite a common issue, particularly if you're working off of on-prem legacy to then move into like a smaller standardized set off-prem.
Oh, regardless, it's whatever your application architecture is like, your tool chain can go in all directions. Working on
Yes.
clients recently, and I don't know, they had, you know how expensive these observability tools are. They had at least 3 and 4 different ones of them, and then they were
Yeah.
doing most of the observability out of something completely different. I think they were using application insights on Azure. So A, you're wasting a lot of money. B, you're wasting a lot of potential of using some of the features of these tools, and B, you're confusing everyone completely because no one knows which tool to go to get the right data, and that's kind of a situation to avoid. But then, like you say, on the other hand, if you just you're starting out and you don't know what tool to use and you don't know how to link your tool chain together, you've got the opposite problem of selecting the right thing up front.
Which, because there are so many different areas, so we do like our 10-step model maturity assessment when we get involved with DevOps clients. And there are so many different tools you can use in each of the individual areas, right? So you've got the actual, let's say, the development part, then you've got the hosting and deployment part, and the observability. Yeah, there are so many options, which kind of makes it hard sometimes to pinpoint exactly which the best ones are. But then I think, tying back again to some of these other layers, that's where, if you've got good processes around keeping an eye on the costs, that also is going to help this kind of decision on, what do we do with the tool sets? If you have that kind of monitoring already in place, I know Azure, again, other providers are available, but I know that is very good for tracking the cost usage and the management over time.
Yeah, I mean, I prefer the cost. I prefer the cost tracking on AWS myself, but yeah, other options are available again.
Absolutely.
But I think the question is, all the way through your tool chain, and you're right from the start, what tooling are you using to manage your backlogs and your sprints and etc. as you're building stuff for the cloud? It does have a big impact on how effective and efficient your cloud is at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I know one client we've been working with recently, probably one of the biggest things that was impinging on the culture was how they'd set up their backlog management and their backlog or your workflows of their PPIs and so on. And actually, it's very hard to tell someone you own this end to end across the whole life cycle when the tooling, the platform, the technologies they're using is telling them something completely different.
Yeah. Yeah, very true.
Nothing to
Very
add
true.
Observability tends to be where you waste a lot of cost on technology just because
Yeah.
the tools are so expensive, and they can be really worthwhile if you get the right one that works for you for what you're trying to do. Sometimes you've got an organization to work for an organization that was very very log heavy, and so they go for a tool which is good at the log processing side of things, and then changing from that. So they were trying to move more towards open telemetry and traces and so on. You've then got to step back and go, is this still the right tool for me? And in that case, it probably wasn't. And so it can be, if you've been too tied into one technology, whether that's an observability tool or your pipelines or whatever, it can then be difficult to move from that. So I think when you get to technology, one of the things you've got to think about is how agnostic do you want to be? You're going to go all open telemetry, you're going to go all cloud agnostic, and this comes onto the platform as well as your pipelines, right? That's going to have an extra cost to it in terms of effort and so on. But if that's really important to you, that you can move agnostically between clouds, then are you going to invest into that? Or you're going to go kind of halfway, that you're going to go, well, we won't put all our eggs in a Lambda, but maybe we will use EKS and we'll use AKS, and we kind of know we can move from one Kubernetes deployment to another without too much effort, and so at least we're keeping our options open.
Yeah,
Similarly with tooling.
It's tricky. It's a tricky balance. I've had similar situations in the past where obviously you've got your own providers you're using at the moment for certain technologies and what have you, but you do want to design it in a way that you're not completely tied down to one vendor. And that can be quite a tricky task when you're trying to design something that is transferable to different languages. It's again trying to balance out risk-free reward, but also it's a different set of to feed it back to processes and people, right? It's another set of technical skills to have to learn, which can be tricky. But I mean, with a lot of these things, I know it's the same with like for example, like the cost management, take that as an example. Across all of the different vendors, it's different terminology, but basically the same theory. So hopefully that should make people empowered to go and, get inquisitive again. It's funny, like we talked about this triangle view, but it is actually a triangle view really, like, because without the people, the processes don't happen in the technology. You can have all of the processes and technology, but the people need to be there to make it happen, and we need to have the right mindset to make it happen. You can have the right people, you can have the right technology, but if the processes aren't there, if they're running around like headless chickens, and if you've got the people and you've got the processes, but you've not got the tech to back it up, then it's a pain. So this is the perfect triangle. Well, not the perfect triangle. It's a good triangle you paint there.
It's another triangle. And I think with all those, you've got to be ready for the future across them all, haven't you?
Yes.
Yeah, if you've got people who have the skills but don't really have the desire to learn, and that going back to my 2 things underneath, you had like 4 or 5 competencies, didn't you? 2 things: that being inquisitive and asking the questions and taking ownership of the outcomes. Unless people are prepared to step up and do that, they're going to find it very hard to keep evolving in the face of a world where things are changing all the time, and where you've got cloud platforms which are always improving because they have to in a competitive market. If you don't have that, you're very soon going to be, your teams are going to become obsolete. You're not ready for the future. Same with the processes, right? If you've just got a set of processes written and dumped on a file share somewhere, or even nicely typed up on Confluence, again, you're very soon going to become obsolete and not keeping up with the value and the cost efficiency you could be getting out of what cloud can now do. You've got to have that ownership. Same with technology, right? If you've locked into one type of tool chain or one type of cloud, and sometimes that's the right thing to do, but if you've done that without thinking about the implications, and you're in a industry where perhaps multi-cloud is going to become much more important, even regulatorily, or multi-region is going to become much more important. You've locked into one particular region. That's something which you need to be thinking about now and deciding which way to go on it.
Couldn't agree more. I think that's actually quite a nice summary to the things we've discussed today, really. So
thank you.
You've done my job. I was going to summarize it, but to be fair, look, you've summarized it perfectly there. So I don't think there's much more point elaborating on that further, really. Doesn't look like there are any other questions, but I mean, if you're watching this retrospectively, you can find myself and Thomas on LinkedIn. Feel free to drop us a message if you've got any questions about any of this stuff. Hopefully you've found this informative. We like our sessions to be quite lighthearted, but still be insightful and informative. So hopefully you've all got something from that. And it kind of sounds like we've got a couple of topics to discuss in a future episode. So be it Cloud Center of Excellence or sustainability, I guess we will have a look and see which one we do next. But I think we've got plenty of episodes coming up, Thomas. So this won't be the last you hear from us.
We'll have to do a LinkedIn poll or something and get people voting. I think if you've got any questions or comments afterwards, drop us a line. I mean, I never ask questions during one of these things, but sometimes things come up later, or you've got ideas on stuff that we might have missed or got wrong, and do share that, and buzz stuff over to us. Connect up on LinkedIn if you're not connected already. That'd be great. And the other thing is, if you feel you've got a lot to add on one of these topics, maybe even the sustainability, again, drop us a line, and we'd love to. We're going to start inviting guests along to these shows. We'd love to have you in the room and sharing your thoughts as well in a future session.
Saves you having to just hear our voices.
But we've had enough of them for now.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's great. Well, thanks for joining. And this has been episode 2 of the Dan and Thomas show. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of your day.